So, colleagues, it is not by surprise where we ended. We ended exactly at the second when the presentation should be over, the debate on the round table, and the involvement of the audience. So, what I will do now is immediately to jump to you and involve you for a couple of minutes. Please, may I get indications of those who want to give somewhat longer statements? Message understood. You wouldn't have got the floor anyway. Please, brief questions, no long statements. Just take the chance to get a response from the panelists. Who wants to take the floor? The message was too clear. I didn't want to kill it at all. Yes, there is one. Icebreaker.
Thank you. I'm Dawn of Seas at Risk. I really appreciated that most of you called for concrete actions and also concrete messages towards the public. Seas at Risk, together with several other NGOs, came here with a concrete question, namely, can you please commit to a target of a 50% reduction of marine litter by 2020? We see that this plea is not taken up in the Berlin message, and we also wonder, given that the ministers here have emphasized the need for concrete actions, why their countries have not committed to quantitative targets under the marine strategy.
I think I collect a little bit if there are more questions, but already to defend a little bit the panelists, they didn't decide on the message of Berlin, it was you. So I think they will have some difficulties to explain why something is not in the message which they have not created. So more questions, please. Yes, here in the first row.
Thank you. My name is Maria Luisa Silva. I come from the Barcelona Convention, and we are engaged in a process of developing a regional action plan, which we hope to present to the parties at the next contracting parties meeting. We have discussed that one of the main problems of marine litter is waste management, and waste management requires significant investments in many of the countries around the Mediterranean basin. And in a context of extremely scarce resources and austerity, I would like to hear from the panelists what your views are as to how we can match the ambition with the necessary resources to meet our commitments. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can take two more and then we go up to the panel. Here in the middle, the lady. This time I don't have a problem to gender balance it.
Hello, I'm Heather Leslie. I'm a researcher at the Institute for Environmental Studies in Amsterdam. One thing we didn't talk a lot about is targets for recycled materials in new products and for repairability of products and for perhaps less ownership of products and more leasing of products. And I'm interested in the panel's opinions and maybe suggestions for measures on how to bring this into practice. It's a great idea, I think.
Thank you. The last one, over there, yeah, please.
Hi, Richard Thompson, Plymouth University, UK. I was delighted to hear all of the presentations from the panelists. I mean, they echo very, very much the sentiment of the meeting over the last couple of days. What I really want to hear is, what do you feel we need to do as a marine litter community, the academics, industry, the NGOs, to actually effectively achieve this change, working with you together? You sound as if you're completely on message with everything we've been saying over the last 2 days, and yet I'm still not hearing what's needed to move forwards concrete actions. The only things that emerged from the last hour or so's discussion was that we needed to raise the profile further into the media, and that we needed to explore whether there was going to be an implication for human health, and that those two things would be the most likely to actually push parliamentary change. And I'm just wondering, is that really what we need to show, given that we're all actually very much on the same message about the harm that marine litter causes and the possible solutions?
Thank you. As everybody was quite green, I just take one more and then we go to the panel. Is there one more? Yes, over there.
Very much. Thank you. Karin Dubsky from Coastwatch. Really enjoyed all the presentations, but to follow on what was just said, if there was something specific, like a Europe-wide deposit on return, or the phasing out of specific problem materials, which we know we have a problem with in all countries on the shore, or a European-wide plastic bag tax, how would the ministers react to that?
So thank you very much for your question, and I think as Jacqueline was the last with presentations, now we start on her side and then we go down the table. Please pick whatever you want from the question and I hope it will cover at the end everything.
I think I'd like to answer the question for the Barcelona Convention from Maria Luigi, my colleague, about waste management sort of infrastructure that needs to be, and I think we might actually look to the south in terms of innovative financing mechanisms. For example, in the Caribbean, we have a revolving sort of financial mechanism called the CRU, and if you've signed up to the LBS protocol, which deals with pollution, you can access cheaper loans for infrastructure related to wastewater management. So, you know, in the south, where there's lots of financial crises and money's even scarcer than in Europe, there's probably lots of examples of some creative financing mechanisms that you might want to consider here in the north.
Thank you. Please.
I'd just like to say that the plastic bag, if it was European-wide, since we bought the plastic bag tax, since we brought it in 2002, we've collected 200 million in our country, which was ring-fenced for environmental activities only. In other words, that if you were to have such a tax, and if you ring-fenced it to environmental issues and marine issues, or whatever you so decided, it's a fantastic resource and it's a commitment. The other point I'd like to make is just the person made a comment there about, you know, lack of resources. I suppose listening to your good self there, Jacqueline, when we talked about internet games and so on, to me something on YouTube that could go viral is a very easy way to communicate. I think the problem is not that we don't know what we need to do, it's just that everybody has to buy into the message in the easiest, simplest way. And I think that if you've got another person might be, you know, an advocate, you know, people listen to footballers and singers and people like that out there. If you were to get somebody in your own country who would act as an advocate for, you know, for the marine issue, and do something on YouTube or do something, you know, give their, what I'm really talking about, if they did something pro bono, you know, or the companies would sponsor such an activity, I believe that's how you transform things. It's not just going to happen. You know, you've got to get the buy-in to it, and you've got to get people to enjoy doing it, and to affirm, you know, that it's worth doing. And I think, you know, champions like that would be very helpful.
Thank you. Janusz.
Thanks, frankly. To be honest, I did not understand some of underlining of not being concrete in the questions, but I will try to explain you. 80% of the litter which we are dealing is land-based. Majority of that is plastics. So what you have to do first is dealing with the waste. We are dealing with the waste. We have waste hierarchy. We are pushing member states. We have implementation programs. They have to deliver the targets. And on the basis, of course, of subsidiarity, they are the ones who have to make the strategies at home, how they will reduce all the things. Majority is plastics, as I said. We have a plastic strategy. Currently, it's in the discussion. We want to bring that in the center of our attention, and we want changes to be done there. I think that one, of course, needs to distinguish two things. One is that we currently have terribly polluted seas. So what to do to deal with the existing situation? Because we all agree that prevention is better than cure, but we can't prevent something which is already there because it's already there. So some of the things are simply impossible to clean, and they will be lying on the seabed, but some are possible to clean, and we have to do it. For me, I think the best way would be absolutely to create incentives and conditions that we have business sector on board. Because if we will not have business sector on board and just relying on our good intentions and awareness and so on for the things which are already there, I think we will need to do more. For the prevention, it's absolutely all the policy which I have been mentioning before. By the way, we are also working on the proposal for single use of plastic bags. If you wish, we can discuss also that. But all those things are in our mind. And that's exactly what we are doing, because we want to create conditions that this mess which is now created in nature would not be repeated. And there was an interesting question also about targets for recycled materials in the new products. Yes, I think, by the way, we have the whole philosophy which we would like to enrich into next year's new proposals on the waste handling, waste targets. But one of the ideas which we of course also have is how it's connected with the eco-design instrument which we have. Currently we are using eco-design is to translate it, what is eco-design? Designing the products in a way that they use less energy, less water, less raw materials, that they are reusable and recyclable. Currently, we are using that legislation, which is, by the way, not in my hands. We are using it in a way to reduce the energy very successfully. It's really working. Now we are thinking about how to enlarge that scope also on the side of water, but we are thinking seriously how to enlarge it also into the area of recyclability or resource efficiency. Because if we force producers' products that they are designed in a way that they are recyclable, this is the utmost necessary step that you go to if you want to 100% circular economy, recyclability society. And that's again something on which we are working. To conclude, because I know I was long, I think there are some fundamental things which today's society it's not really understanding, and we Europeans in particular would need to take attention to those things. In 30 years, that's in one generation, there will be on this planet 2 billion more people, which is more than the whole population at the beginning of the previous century. Because at the beginning of the previous century it was 1.5 billion. In 30 years, in one generation, more than at the beginning of the previous century. In 15 years, which is half of the generation, we will have 3 billion more consumers which will move from poverty to the middle class consumption. Do we really think that we can continue like we started, having 60% of our ecosystems degraded, having 80% of fish in Europe overfished, being 40% short of water if we continue business as usual in 15 years? So it's fundamental imperative that we change to a model which would go to the direction of resource efficiency and circular economy. Because in 15 years, the questions of our competitiveness and all those stories will be rubbish if we don't talk about those things. This is the new industrial policy of the future. Think it in economic terms if you don't believe that this is an environmental issue.
This time it's definitely not for the championship, so. Bitte, Altmaier.
Yes, thank you. The question that was asked with regard to the financial costs of waste management systems, I know they are expensive, they have been expensive even in countries like Denmark, the Netherlands, Germany, with a high GDP. Therefore, what I can see is, and we have the first initiatives with that regard, is a joint ventures with private companies from countries with enormous and lengthy experience of waste management systems. I know there are companies as pioneer groups in China, in Russia, in Turkey, organizing local, regional management waste systems. And as far as the region concerned is, I'm pretty much convinced when it is done properly and in an intelligent way, you can earn a lot of money by using the waste as a secondary raw material mining possibility. And that's what we have to achieve, and then we can perhaps in a couple of years have self-financing management systems. It's now, of course, not yet possible. Today it is still costly, but we have already reduced it, and we have realized in Germany that many materials are becoming more and more attractive for recycling methods, even without any financial support from taxpayers' money. The second point relates to the question whether we should have a certain quota for recycled materials into new products. As I mentioned, Janusz Potocznik has initiated the resource efficiency platform. I'm taking personally part in the discussions there, and what we have discussed and what we have agreed is that we want not only to increase resource efficiency, we also want on the medium and long term perspective a decoupling. We know that it's very difficult to achieve, and it's very ambitious, but that is the aim, and we have to discuss the best working strategies. What I can tell you in Germany, where we have a recycling quota of 40, a resource efficiency quota of 47%, what is already quite a lot. I see that in many branches of industries, where the managers and CEOs were arguing for many years, oh, you cannot use secondary materials that are recycled, you have to rely on primary materials in order to have a good quality. Now more and more people are realizing, no, it is simply not true. You can have endless cycles of recycling with regard to steel, with regard to other materials as well. I've been in a company where rubber is recycled, and even there they have made enormous progress. The question with regard to the Euro-wide plastic bag tax, it sounds so popular. I'm impressed by the Irish example, but I can tell you in Germany as well, I've got the impression that I have seen so many more plastic bags 20 years ago in the environment than we can find today. We still find some litter in the environment, but the plastic bags have, to a big extent, disappeared. And this is a consequence, first of all, of raising consciousness in education and in the behavior of the people, and the collection of separated waste by separated bins. We have a special bin for all these plastic packaged materials, and my impression is it works also very well, and of course it is financed already today by the taxpayer, because the taxpayer has to finance all these management systems. So this is, in my eyes, not an ideological issue, it is a practical, pragmatic issue, and we have to reduce the overall number considerably of plastic bags in the environment. This is something where I feel committed. The strategies are under discussion. The question from the very first question, why was no reference in the Berlin message to the 50% reduction objective? Well, it was not drafted by us, it was presented to us, so that is up to you. But I, as an environment secretary in Germany for almost 10 months now, I always try to set objectives and aims that are honest and realistic. Because we have an enormous, I almost would say, I need a waste proposal for not achieved objectives from the past. And that means, when I'm not against setting and defining objectives, but they have to be calculated in a very serious way. You have to know what you need when you want to reduce until 2020 this waste by 50%, then you have to know where it comes from, you have to know what you have to do in order to achieve that objective. So I'm convinced we are not yet at the end of the day with that debate, but we need more information, and this is why I have said in the beginning, we need a monitoring, we need much more detailed knowledge about it. And the question from the UK, what we are doing effectively, well, a number of things have been mentioned. I still believe it is not yet enough, it is far from being enough, but in order to achieve that, it is not important to convince all of us at this panel. It is important to convince prime ministers, chancellors, heads of states and governments. It's important to convince the public opinion, and this is why I have said in the beginning, we have to put it on a higher rank in the international agenda, and therefore we need the support from the media as well. And that's exactly what I'm going to do in Germany when I announced this round table. The round table will discuss concrete and specific issues, but it's also an opportunity to produce pictures for TV and newspapers, where you then can initiate a debate that will help us to convince parliaments and media.
Thank you very much. Finally, Matthias Groth.
Yeah, first question, which the lady asked from Spain, from Barcelona Association. We have to introduce in whole Europe the polluter pays principle. That's totally clear, to finance such things. It's not the task of the society to pay the bill in the end, in their own terms. The polluter pays principle we have to follow really strictly. The question on leasing, and is it possible? I know that Judith Merkis from the Netherlands is following this line really strictly. I think in some parts it's really important to go this way, but it's also limited, I must say. In industry it's fine. If you, for example, need in a plant pressure system and you need it only for a limited time, then it's better to lease it as to buy it, because it's really in an economical way also better to do it. And so it's limited, and we prepared a study on the leasing society, and it's available on the ENVI homepage. We published it last week, 2 weeks ago, and we had the debate in the Environment Committee. What can we do on materials? They're really bad to the environment, and should we ban them? I'm really a fan of REACH, the chemical legislation. And if it's possible to substitute materials, we should go the way to substitute them and then to forbid them. Okay, with transition periods, it's totally clear. But if 80% of the waste of the litter in the oceans are plastic, then we have to act. And this is the way to act, and we did it in another really important legislation in REACH and substitution. We can substitute. And the key for the whole thing to solve the marine litter is, for me, the cycle economy. To think in all ways in the cycle economy, recycling, resource efficiency, and then we can solve many problems, not only in this field, also in other fields. And to forbid different things, perhaps in the electronic, these phones are nice, they are designed nice, but they're so designed that it's not possible to remove the battery. And we have existing law in Germany. In Europe we have no law. We have to forbid it. We have to bring it to the manufacturer, really norms that it's possible to have a really high quota of recycling materials. And the minister had it really raw materials, second raw materials. And so we have to think about our legislation sometimes and to forbid such things, to design it in this way.
Thank you very much. No side as a media are waiting outside for our panelists. Just a thank you to the organizing teams from the Commission, from BNU, from UBA, from the consultants, and a word of thanks to Angelika Heckhausen, Gerhard Beer, and Mandy Barker, the artists. Thank you for all your contributions. I started with a picture that Marion Litter lasts in a train from here to the moon and halfway back. Let's work strong that it doesn't reach Mother Earth again. Thank you.